Welcome to A Life in Marketing. Today, we're chatting to a former UE student who has since worked extensively in the entertainment industry.
Our guest has worked in both the music industry and film industry, including many years at Universal Pictures before she moved into more recent work with hotel and coffee brands.
We're delighted to be speaking to Melanie Nicholas about what it's actually like to be an insider in the entertainment industry and how her career has evolved, recently taking on non-executive and consultancy roles too.
Let's introduce you to Mel.
Well, welcome, Mel. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. We're delighted to have you here with us. So just to introduce you to the listeners, how do you describe yourself to people that you meet at dinner parties and things?
Yeah, so I try not to talk too much about jobs at dinner parties because I'm never sure people are that interested. But anyway, I am a chief marketing officer, and most of my time has been spent in film and entertainment, and more recently in hospitality. And I'm currently sort of marketing myself as the marketing fixer, somebody that goes into smaller businesses and tries to help them really work out why their marketing perhaps isn't working.
You did mention the entertainment industry, and the first thing that comes to mind is sort of it's very glamorous. Would you say, based on your experience, that it is as glamorous as people think?
Well, let's start with the good stuff. It can be glamorous, and premieres and red carpet events are fantastic. Not going to lie, they're fantastic. But you are working when you're on them. So, you're always anxious to make sure that you're getting what you need from that event, because obviously premieres and red carpet events are really expensive, and you're dealing with, maybe people that are quite tricky, quite creative, quite emotional. So that can be quite stressful, but it is glamorous. But we used to laugh and say, being in entertainment's a bit like freshly popped popcorn. It tastes and smells and looks great, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of sweeping up. And you're having to really justify what you're doing all the time because it's big money. Entertainment companies have a lot of money to spend on marketing, which is great. But you've also got a lot of CFOs and finance people breathing down your necks, looking for that return on investment. So it isn't just, let's throw a premiere. It's, well, what's that premiere going to give us? What's the ROI? How are we going to use the content? How's that going to sell the movie? How's that going to sell the streaming? It's quite complex. The other downside, I suppose, to working in entertainment is a lot of people want to do it. So there's a big queue for your job. So if you're not working really hard and making sure you're, producing the results that is expected of you, there's literally a queue of people that will take that job from you.
I think one of the crucial things there, as you said, is the return on investment. If you have such a big budget, sort of how can you justify the spending? When you talk about return on investment, would you say in the entertainment industry, is it really mainly sort of viewership? So how many people are actually going to go see the movie or, watch on Netflix, or are there other sort of metrics, say social media mentioning, engagement, that count as well?
Yeah, the metrics that the finance guys are usually interested in, what are the ticket sales? So what's the box office of the movie? And the opening weekend is always crucial. How many people went to see it in that opening weekend? Because that's where your word of mouth then is created. And that then fuels people going back the second week and more people going back the third week. But other metrics would be, yes, what's the film going to do at streaming? How many people are going to download and own it? Are we still speaking to the director on good terms with the director? So if he or she does another movie, are we in the running for distributing that movie as well? So there's lots of metrics. Yeah, we want to be famous for that film. As a studio, we want that film to do well, but we also want to be, as a studio, associated with that film. So there's kind of, when I worked for Universal, we were obviously plugging the movie first, but we wanted to make sure that people realized it was a Universal film. Because that gave us future credibility. So there's lots of metrics. But yeah, box office really important, obviously. It kicks it all off, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And just to give the listeners the kind of idea about the films you worked on, I guess when Universal is known for like the Jurassic Park franchise and, well, years ago, Back to the Future, and then Fast and Furious, I think the franchise. So were they the kind of films you were working on, or any others?
Yeah, so Fast and Furious, actually, I worked on right from the beginning. So I think you will know there's 10 movies plus the spin-off with Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. So yeah, Fast and Furious franchise for sure. The Jason Bourne
Oh yeah.
franchise, we started that when I was at Universal. Despicable Me, because I when the producer of Despicable Me came to us and said, look, I've got this idea for a kids franchise, we're going to call it Despicable Me. We were like, oh, that's a punchy name for children, and will they be able to say it? Will they even understand what it means? And so Despicable Me started when I was there. Jurassic Park already existed, but there were new films coming out, and obviously I don't know if you've seen the latest Jurassic Park movie. I'm plugging Universal even now, but that's apparently fantastic and well worth watching. So yeah, they're the sorts of movies that we were making.
Yeah, that sounds really glamorous, but when you're actually doing the marketing and the marketing campaigns and planning and strategy and finance and things, do you actually think about what the fact that it's a glamorous movie? I mean, the same way, I think you started in the music industry as well. Is it pretty similar basically to if you were marketing, other kinds of widgets or consumer products? When you're actually in the weeds doing the work. I asked this question partly because I started out many years ago when I was at university, spending my holidays at Sony, Sony Music, in London. And actually, the work that people were doing in their offices was just, booking adverts, and it was, doing the same stuff that other people in other industries do. And you don't necessarily realise, or you're not talking to Michael Jackson every day, for example. What you're actually doing is the same as every other marketer. But so, is it significantly different when you're actually doing the job? I guess is what I'm asking.
No, it's not significantly different, Tom. You're right. You are still, you're starting off with what marketers always start off with. Who's going to be interested in this product? So who's going to be interested in this film? And you might have a broad audience for some movies, or you might have a very niche audience. So, for example, horror movies have a much tighter audience. You're going to market that to children. You're probably going to have a younger demographic, maybe 20s. But you always start with who's the audience, so who's going to buy this product, and then really what are the best ways to reach them. In traditional marketing, just as if it were a toothpaste or a shampoo, where are these people going to be seeing my advertising? Where's the best place to advertise for them? How do I generate some word of mouth, some publicity, some interest, some intrigue? I mean, trailers, cutting the first trailers is very important, and perhaps a toothpaste doesn't have its own trailer, but these days it will certainly have a digital ad to go with it. So in that respect, it's, the products have caught up with film in a way.
I guess one of the differences is that films and music involve marketing people, and they're not quite as easy to control and manage. Like my phone, for example. Whoever does the marketing for Apple, they've got a static product which isn't going to do anything silly. Whereas I was actually watching a documentary about Ozzy Osbourne last night, and this all the antics he was getting up to in the 80s. You think, what a nightmare for his record label to try and get him to do anything normal, because you never knew what he was going to do on any given day of the week. So I'm not saying that any of your actors would have been quite that crazy, but there must be things that are out of your control that make marketing a little bit more tricky.
Yes, definitely right. Definitely right, Tom. So yes, you're right. Whereas your phone or my tube of toothpaste doesn't have an opinion, the cast and stars in films do, and the producer does, and the director does. So there's a lot of people who will have a view, and they will voice that opinion, and the room can get quite crowded with, conflicting opinions. And I think as marketeers, our job was obviously to respect and listen to those opinions, because when a film director produces a film, it's his or her baby. They've perhaps worked on that film for years. And then, marketeers come along and they've literally just looked at that product for the first time. And for us not to listen to the director's vision and ideas for how that movie should be marketed would be, incredibly disrespectful and also quite stupid, because the director is obviously the best person to know about that product. But what they don't always understand is who's going to watch their film. They kind of want to feel that everyone's going to watch my movie. And the reality is everyone isn't a target audience. We need to be tighter than that. And we haven't got the budgets, as big as they are in film businesses. You haven't got the budget to market to everybody. You've only got enough money to market to the people who are most likely to want to go to see that film or buy that movie. So you do have to narrow those choices down, and that can be very tricky. And sometimes, in all honesty, we did have to do things that we didn't necessarily think were right. If Tom Cruise wants it to be blue and we say it's red, guess what? It was blue. So, you had to pick your battles. You had to know when you were outgunned. You needed a lot of EQ. You needed a lot of influencing and, manipulative skills to get people to where you wanted them to be. And it was just a question of knowing when can I change this person's view and when am I just better off sticking with what they want. There were also things like if you had an actor who was maybe a recovering alcoholic, they obviously didn't want to be associated with brand partners like drinks. So you would respect those sorts of things completely. And some actors did have, they had in their contracts stipulations, we won't be associated with cigarettes or we won't be associated with animal products if they're vegan. So we had to work around those sets of restrictions as well. And again, Tom, your iPhone, my toothpaste doesn't have ideas about which brand partners they should be matched with.
Mel, can I ask you about whether you can, this is very simply put now, whether you can market a bad movie? So, when you think about marketing and people say, a good marketeer can sort of sell any product or make any product successful. And thinking of Despicable Me, for example, which is hugely successful and a fantastic movie, and I'm just wondering how much marketing can do if it isn't a good product.
It's a really, really good question. And we had a saying at Universal where the guy that ran the studio basically would come to meetings and say there's 4 things that are important in marketing a movie: product, and marketing. So in other words, if the product isn't right, how you market it is going to be less important. So I think you can make a bad movie slightly better by positioning it in a certain way. And you've all seen trailers where, the marketeers have put all the best bits of the movie in the trailer. Yeah. But what happens? You go to the film, you're disappointed, you tell 10 people. So, ultimately, that success is short-lived. Yeah. I think it's more about, trying to find the right audience for that film. And, some horror movies that we've marketed in the past were terrible, but actually they were so bad, they were good, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And actually marketed, in that way to the right audience, people would be laughing in the cinema, you're thinking, well, I'm not sure this was meant to be funny. But it almost became, the joke. And that can sometimes work, not too many times, but sometimes you can do that with it.
Is it ever appropriate for a marketer to get involved in the movie itself, in the plot and the casting and that kind of stuff, or do you have to step aside at that point?
So we were occasionally, not too often, but we were occasionally as marketing teams asked by the studio or directors, are there any particular cast members that we should be thinking about for an international audience? So, Universal makes most of its films in the States, but they obviously want their films to have universal appeal, international appeal, I mean. And so some of the actors need to be, non-American for them to have appeal outside of the States. So I remember for Fast and Furious, the franchise had been going, we'd had 5 successful films in the franchise, so it was doing well. And the producers said to us, who would be a good actor to come into the franchise now that would broaden out this appeal, because it was doing really well in the States, but other markets not so well. And we suggested Jason Statham, because he'd done brilliantly in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He'd just started Transporter, that whole franchise. And we said, look, he's a great baddie. He's an action man. He's a tough guy. He's a Brit. People know him. He would be a good addition to your cast, we think. So I don't know if you remember, but in Fast and Furious 6, he makes a cameo appearance. And then he becomes, the main antagonist for the next 3 Fast and Furiouses, until he goes on to then do the spin-off with Dwayne Johnson. So yeah, in that instance, I think we could say, Tom, it wasn't just me, lots of marketing people within Universal were asked, but we came up with this idea that Jason Statham would be fab, and he was.
I guess you must have to watch a lot of films then to have that sort of insight to know. I know Jason Statham's quite well known, but to be aware of where the film sits in the market and what's come before. You must be a bit of a film buff yourself, are you?
So, I mean, I'm not a film buff. I do watch a lot of films. You have to watch a lot of films. And if you're in the film industry, you sort of have to like going to the cinema or watching films at home. I have interviewed people in the past. I remember one person in particular, I interviewed her for a marketing role. And my opening question to her was, do you like watching films? And she said, no, not really. And I said, look, I think possibly this is the end of the interview. We can now stay and have a nice chat about what you really want to do, so that you haven't wasted your time coming here. But I don't honestly feel you're going to be the right person for me if you don't like film. And we had a really nice chat. And she ended up years later actually contacting me saying, the best meeting I ever had was with you, Mel, because you told me that probably I wasn't right for film, and I ended up doing this amazing role. And she worked for charities. She led some amazing charities because she really wanted a job that was much more purposeful, a non-profit. And she'd been attracted by the sort of glamour of film, but really her heart was in something a bit more serious. So, yeah, not for everyone.
Yeah. I'm conscious we've asked you a lot about film, but actually that isn't really your world anymore. You kind of you've taken your experience and applied it to other sort of consumer sectors. And I think most recently you've been working in the hotel sector and coffee as well, even more recently. Particularly the hotel challenge. I think I read that you were repositioning the hotel brand for a different audience, which sounds like a big challenge. What led you to that, and was it as significant a challenge as it sounds?
It's a big challenge. I was headhunted into that role. So you've got a 20-year-old brand that needs to be repositioned to a younger audience. I have to say, repositioning any brand, particularly a luxury hotel brand, to a younger audience, it's a bit like trying to get your parents on TikTok. It's possible, but you need a lot of patience and you need a lot of persuasion. And you need to be realistic about what you can actually do, particularly in the hospitality business. Unlike film, the budgets are much smaller and the profit margins are much tighter. So, you really do have to be careful where you're going to invest that money. And I think what we ended up doing for the hotel collection was really trying to attract a younger audience by first making our marketing look and feel much younger. So, a new color palette. Obviously, we didn't change the logo, but we had new color palettes. We introduced video into our website. We did a lot more work across our social media channels. We did set up ourselves on TikTok so that we were appealing to a younger audience. But we also looked at what food we were offering. Were we offering food that younger people want to eat? There was a lot of rich food on the menu that perhaps wasn't quite right for a younger audience. Were we offering the right drinks choices? There were, again, lots of wines. Perhaps we needed more cocktails. Even small details like, were we offering dairy equivalents? Were we offering oat milk, soya milks for our coffee offer? So cool brands. Were we associating with the right brands? We had some nice skincare brands, but could we go niche and younger with some of those partners as well? Our spa treatments. were they the right spa treatments, again, for a younger audience? So there were lots of things we could do to make sure that the product that we were offering didn't alienate our traditional loyal customers, because we still wanted them. They spent money in our hotels and they've been coming for years. But we wanted to make sure that there was enough that was appropriate for a younger guest.
Were there many skills that you could take from your previous experience in the entertainment industry? I mean, I guess that things like segmentation and branding, that's the same approach, but you must have had to pick up some new skills as well, and there must be some big differences between marketing. One of the big differences is the hotel is always open. It isn't just a big campaign to launch a film and then move on. It's a constant. So what were the differences and parallels between the two areas that you can identify?
Yeah, so you're right on segmentation, Tom. You obviously had to segment your market. That's always where you're starting. Who are you trying to appeal to, and who are you not? There has to be people that you're not trying to go after. You can't go after everyone. I think having a lot of experience in publicity is really good, because you do need to get coverage, as you say, 12 months of the year, and to get drip feeding, campaigns of publicity throughout the year, you've got to come up with stories and angles and ideas. There is seasonality to hospitality. There's seasonality to film as well. Most people go and see films in the winter, for example, in our country when it's colder. Summer, there are summer blockbusters, but there aren't as many films released in the summer. That's on purpose, because people are on holiday and they won't go and see them. In hotels, there's more of a continuous flow, but there's still seasonality. You obviously get summer high as people want to stay in hotels, but you also get some nice business around Christmas, people wanting to stay in hotels and have Christmas with their families in hotels. So there is seasonality. Other skills that I brought across, I think, knowing how to market to a younger audience, obviously having marketed films to younger people, that was really helpful. And also having done a lot of video work, because a film is a product that you can see and hear. So the obvious medium to promote it on is video. So that you can do out of home and you can do press ads, but if I can see and hear a film, that's the most powerful. And I think the same with hotels. You're creating an experience. It's not just about the room, and it's not just about where it is. It's what do I do when I get there, and what's it going to feel and look like. So if I can show families running through the garden of a hotel and having fun, and then show them in the swimming pool, show them in the dining room later, that's much more powerful. And you're creating really a mini story around that family's weekend away, aren't you? Which is, if you dumb it down, is a bit like a film. It's just a very short film about one family going away for the weekend and hopefully having a wonderful time.
I love what you said, Mel, about the hotel, or changing the target audience to younger, in terms of, it's not just, people think marketing is just about the marketing communications, right? So how do you communicate what the hotel is about? But actually looking at the product itself, and obviously a hotel is only to stay the night, or maybe a weekend or a week, or however long, and use some of the facilities. But how important it is to really look at the product itself when it comes to a repositioning strategy, and thinking about, what do they eat, what do they want to drink, what can we offer that actually makes that product more appealing to that target audience. It's a really just important thing to remember when it comes to marketing. You've worked on so many different campaigns, and obviously we talk about years of experience, and we talked a lot about the film industry, a bit about sort of hotel. Is there any favorite campaign that you would say, this is something you always remember, for whatever reason? And could you share that reason, what your favorite campaign would have been over the past few years?
Yeah, I think launching Odeon Luxe. So Odeon Luxe is Odeon's luxury cinema sub-brand. I think we call it a sub-brand. And what we were trying to do with Odeon Luxe was, basically, we were going into tired, sort of sticky cinemas, and turning them into, something with reclining seats, nice wine, date night glamour. So we were sort of bringing a Hollywood makeover, if you like, to a British cinema brand. And we needed to keep the essence of it being a British cinema brand. So Odeon was set up by a guy called Oscar Deutsch. He was British. His parents were Jewish Hungarian immigrants back in the 20s. And he'd set up Odeon, and of course it got all that lovely Art Deco connotations. You know, the logo is the 1930s sort of Art Deco, copying the Hollywood sign. So it was this lovely brief of, you've got a British cinema, but we want to give it a Hollywood makeover, and we want to make it beautiful for today's audiences. You know, and Everyman had done this, and Picture House had done this. So we'd got competitors around us who had been very successful in doing it too. And I think my favourite thing about that was really, to your point earlier, Hannah, there was a lot of product work. There was a lot of product work. Before we got to promotion, there was a lot of product work because we were creating a new product, weren't we? It was based on a master brands, but we were creating a sub-brand from there. And so, you know, working with architects, interior designers, food and beverage people, partners, other brand partners, trying to create something that still was a cinema experience at its heart, but had a lot more to it. And we were going to change the pricing, make it more premium. So that was also important. You know, were people going to feel, well, hang on a minute, last week I could watch this movie for this amount. Now you've changed the cinema. I'm having to pay twice as much. Is it worth it? Will I drive past a cheaper cinema to get to Odeon Lux? So there were lots of anxieties and questions that needed answering. But today when I drive past Odeon Lux, I get a little flutter in my heart. And I just think, you know, me and loads of other people, we did that.
Fantastic. How do you hope to take your experience and sort of shape the next part of your career and whatever you do next as a consultant and in the roles that you're taking on at the moment?
So I'm hoping that lots of what I've talked about, I can bring to smaller businesses who have not had maybe people who have worked across the breadth of brands that I've worked across. So, you know, those teams within those businesses, they're probably, you know, highly qualified and they've got some great ideas, but they just haven't had the experience that I've had, you know, the knocks, the highs, the lows, the looking around corners, the figuring things out that I've had. So I'm just hoping I can bring that kind of grown up in the room. That sounds slightly patronizing, but I just want to be the grown up in the room that really helps elevate what they're doing, which is probably right, to another level.
Right. Are there any particular sectors that, I mean, obviously it's been hospitality and entertainment mainly. Are there any, is that your area of focus? I guess that's your expertise to date, isn't it?
It's sort of where I'm most credible, Tom. So I sort of describe myself as film, entertainment, hospitality, but because I've got Odeon and Handpicked hotels as hospitality, and obviously Universal as film. But I'm also helping smaller businesses. You're right, coffee is one of them. I'm also helping other smaller hotel management companies, so that, you know, they're the people that manage other people's hotels for them. So, but I think with marketing, you should be able to market anything. You should be able to market anything. I don't think there's a product that I couldn't market, but then someone listening to this podcast will probably say, well, what about this? And I might get stuck on that one. But I think if it's, and it doesn't matter whether it's B2B or B2C, I'm really quite passionate about that. I don't think there's much of a difference. B2B is still you're still marketing to people. So I should be able to go across more sectors, but I think my credibility at the moment, as I'm starting off calling myself the marketing fixer, is in the areas that I've had most experience. But yeah, hopefully I'll go broader.
Yeah. And are there any particular things that you've been asked to fix that are, you know, if we talk about segmentation, for example, is that a common starting point that people say, you know, can you help me with this? Or is it branding, or is it publicity? Are there other particular things that you tend to be asked to fix?
Yeah, so publicity is often one of them, because lots of people don't have much experience of publicity. and obviously film relies heavily on word of mouth and publicity. Branding, yes. Is our branding popping? Are people noticing us? Why aren't we getting noticed? Partnerships. Who can we get a brand halo from? Who can I partner with that's maybe a bit more bougie than me, that I can benefit from? What can I bring to them? So trying to match people to partners, having a look at channels that are currently being used and sort of just working out the ROI of those. So, are you right to keep booking meta ads? Are they actually giving you a return on investment, or would you be better off, literally turning those off and looking at something else? And then I think the biggest thing actually that I try to bring to, well, there's two things that I try to bring to businesses that I'm helping to fix. One, have you got a written down marketing plan? And it's really important that it's written down, and it doesn't need to be very long, but has it been written down, and has everyone in your business, not just the marketing team, read it and bought into it? Because unless that's in place, then, you could need a lot more fixing. And then the second thing, is joined up marketing. So because we now have a world where we have lots of marketing specialists, each doing their own thing, the social media manager, the CRM manager, the performance manager, the PR manager, who is conducting that orchestra of specialists? And it has to be the CMO. And if you haven't got a CMO, that's where I can come in and sort of maybe help you set up how you lead people across all of these specialisms so that you're all playing the same tune.
I think you said earlier, which I thought was really interesting, that especially maybe not just when you worked for film, but that there is a row of people waiting to take your job. And I'm wondering how you dealt with that pressure. So any, tips and advice for people who might be in the industry at the moment and might fear that pressure of, somebody would be very eager and very keen to take my job. And also whether you can share a few piece of advice on how people could follow into your footsteps, obviously, with your amazing career.
Sure. I mean, listen, there were many days where I would go into the toilets for a quiet cry. The pressure would get to you. You would think, crikey, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Or you'd think, am I the best person? You'd have those doubts of perhaps this person who's snapping at my heels for my role, perhaps they would be better than me. I think don't underestimate what you know. Because, if you've been anywhere for a length of time, you know so much, you can speak their language so fluently. Actually, one of the things you asked me earlier, Tom, was what was one of the transitions from film to hotels. And it was literally the main pain point was learning their language, learning the hospitality language. What did all these acronyms mean? People would talk in shorthand. I didn't really understand it. It was like learning Dutch for the first time. And then, after 6 months, you're beginning to get fluent. So I think, the pressure is always going to be there. I don't think that's ever going to change, Hannah, to be honest. I don't think you're ever going to feel like I'm untouchable. The ways you can kind of future-proof yourself, bulletproof yourself, if you like, is keep learning and keep taking qualifications. I've always continued to book myself onto courses. Sometimes the company paid for it. Sometimes they didn't. So I do the CIM masterclass in social media. I do the mini MBAs with Mark Ritson. Yeah. I've just been on an MMC learning course for AI. If you can, it helps build your confidence because you think, well, okay, I'm not out of date. These people are not, they don't know more than me because I'm literally keeping up with everything that's currently available. So I continually learning, but you're probably having to do that in your own time and at your own expense. So, but it helped me feel like I was still, relevant and performing.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Thank you very much. We're just about at the end of our discussion, so thanks for giving up so much of your time. We always finish with a few quickfire questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully nice and simple. So first quickfire question is, what's your favorite marketing campaign of all time?
Yeah, this is so hard, Tom. It's such a mean question. I'm gonna go film, and I'm gonna go Barbie. So the Barbie film released 2023. I think, first of all, it was everywhere. I mean, Pink took over the world for a few weeks, didn't it? A few months. I did hear somewhere that the Pantone Pink for Barbie, that there was a shortage. That's definitely a PR story, isn't it? But I loved it anyway. I loved the fact that we had billboards, bus stops, Google search, even a Barbie dream house, Airbnb. I loved all of that creativity. And then the partnerships that they had, Xbox, Crocs, even a pink burger from Burger King. Loved it. I thought they were clever with their double audience. So appealing to mums like me who have grown up with Barbie, but also girls today who are discovering Barbie. I thought that was lovely. And I think they managed to do, more than just a film release. I think we had a cultural moment there, didn't we? And then, them joining up with Oppenheimer, because they had opening weekends, very different audiences, but, sort of you could go and see both at cinemas if you wanted to. I thought that was really clever. So I'm gonna put Barbie there.
Fantastic. Next one tool or app you can't live without.
ChatGPT. It's got to be ChatGPT. I took my course. I'm accredited now in AI for marketers for the moment. I mean, that's just become out of date literally overnight, hasn't it? I use lots of tools with AI to help me: Midjourney, Creo, Leonardo, Claude. But my favorite is ChatGPT, and he knows me best.
He knows all of us, I think.
No, he knows me best.
Most underrated skill in marketing, do you think?
Yeah, I think EQ.
Yeah.
If you haven't got EQ, you're not going to have a good career in marketing, I'm afraid, because you have to be emotionally intelligent, particularly if you're going to want to work in a creative industry. You're going to meet a lot of people who will challenge your, patience. And you need to be empathetic. You need to try and understand them. You need to understand what makes them tick. And I think to get to know customers and consumers, you need to understand people generally. So EQ, you've got to have it.
Brilliant. And what's the biggest misconception about working in marketing?
Well, I think, Hannah, you sort of put your finger on it earlier. And I'm sure other CMOs and marketeers have said it, everyone thinks it's just 1 P and it's 4 Ps. And we can say it until we're blue in the face, but everyone wants to talk about promotion and actually, price, place, product, equally important. And so if you just want to do the colouring in, you're going to be a bit disappointed with marketing, I think. At a senior level, I think, at a CMO level, you've got to be equally interested in all of those other Ps.
Well, thank you very much for all your time, Melanie. It's been a fantastic insight into your career and hopefully some inspiration for people that might want to follow in your footsteps. You mentioned that you're a fixer and you're taking on consultancy work. How should people contact you if they want to find out more about your experience and maybe invite you to come and work with them?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Hannah. So if anyone wants the marketing fixer, I'm on melanie@sevenmuse.com. And if you go onto my LinkedIn profile, Melanie Nicholas, you can find me very easily on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mel.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Hannah.